One aspect that makes for a very powerful platform is this kind of idea of deploying workflows. And what deploying workflows allows you to do is allows you to create composable kind of workflows and build your own kind of design intelligence, and then take that as a unit and run it or call it from different kind of softwares within your pipeline. For example, I can create different kind of workflows that then I can call in Grasshopper or in Rhino, or I can create inside Versur workflows that automatically trigger Rhino and Grasshopper. And to be able to have that kind of connection, we have to deploy the workflow. We have to make them accessible in a way to external, or to have them like be able to read external kind of information. Let's see, how do we deploy a workflow? If we're going back to our initial example where we were just playing with this kind of ideas of generating a couple of images, what we have to do is we have to be able now to convert this into something that other applications can actually use. If I'm deleting this, we delete all these aspects that we don't really need, and we're just going to keep it clean. Currently, if we run this process again, let's do it with the prompt that we already have here. As you can see right now, what I have is I have an agent that outputs something. I have an image generator. We have the agent that outputs something. Then we have the image, then we have the static agent that outputs something for us. And what I want to do is I want to be able to package in a way this knowledge and be able to access it from an external software. For example, what I'm going to do is I have to create now a sort of output, because right now, as you can see here, we are just outputting each individual block. Pretty much the outputs then at the level of the block, but we need to create now a output that is at the level of the entire workflow. And to be able to do that, we can do a similar thing like what we have here with input. So the input here is the input at a global level, let's say, of the workflow. Now we need an output that's at the global level of the workflow. I'm going to create here an output component, and I'm going to connect it to the static agent. Now, remember that when we connect blocks together, if they are within the same branch, we can then connect them. So we can connect or have access to all these blocks that are upstream. We have access to all this information for all these blocks. Here, if I'm expanding this, I can switch here to editor. And what I'm going to do here, I can say we have to create code here. I'm just going to start with curly brackets, and then I'm going to go quotation mark, and I'm going to say image. I want to output the image, and the image right now, it's inside block generator 4. I'm going to say add, and then I'm going to select here generator 4 image. What this is going to say is if I'm keeping it like this, although like you see here, we have agent, a static agent that's outputting certain evaluation criteria there and values, or although we have the agent, we are only going to output here images. If I want to output the reasoning of the agent, I can always then say comma and then say reasoning and then add, and we take the reasoning of the agent. When I'm going to execute this now, I'm going to have as an output there, the output block is going to send only that information, the image and the reasoning. And why we do that is because sometimes we have certain processes that workflow, you don't need to have them exposed in the sense of you don't have to see all those details. When you're building the workflow, it's good to have it and then to trace it later. But when you interact perhaps in Rhino, let's say you want to bring a workflow in Rhino and you want to run some visualizations, you're not so concerned now with the fact that the workflow also has a process of fine-tuning the prompt and iterating through different kind of options and then just giving you the best option. And what you care perhaps in that Rhino output is just the final outcome. Then, when you're deploying and when we are preparing a workflow to be deployed, you can select which is the specific information that I'm going to get when the workflow is run. Here you see when we are opening the output, you see right now we have only the image and only the reasoning as output, as a response. That's the only data. And this is just because we created this small here syntax response data. We are specifying you have to output the image, and I call it image, and I provided the image and then the reasoning, and I provided like where we are getting the reasoning from. This is pretty much now a workflow that is ready to be deployed. Now what I'm going to do is, the way we deploy it, we go here to deploy. And when you click on it, you see you have different types of deployment. So you can deploy this simply for Versur Canvas. And the Versur Canvas is this specific page here. And we are going to go over Canvas in a moment, not in this specific video, but in the future videos. You can deploy it and then have it in the Canvas. and you're going to be able now to access the workflow from the canvas. We can deploy it externally to other applications. When you're going to click on that, you'll see what you have here. Probably in your case, you don't have all this kind of things. What I like to do is I like to create an API key, which is almost like a secret key that if you're careful, only you have access to this specific key. And then no one can run your workflows without having this specific API key. In your case, probably you don't have this list. Personally, I like to always create API keys that are specific to a sort of software that I'm using. You see here, I know that I'm using it for processing, development, CLI, or Rhino. If I want to create one, let's say just for Grasshopper, I can create here a new API key, and I'm going to say this is Grasshopper. I'm going to say create. And like this, I'm going to have now also Grasshopper key. And then when I'm going here to deploy, I can select now and say this deployed workflow is going to be associated with the key from Grasshopper. This is super important because you have to have a very clean, organized way of which are the workflows that are deployed and which keys they are attached to that workflow. It's like this. If in the future, let's say you want to terminate all the connections to Grasshopper, I can just delete the API key for Grasshopper, and all the workflows that were associated with that specific API key, all those workflows are going to be now disconnected. This way, it's a way of managing it. You see here, I selected Grasshopper, and I would say deploy. And now this is a deploy API that I can use and execute things externally. We are going to show this, I'm going to show this in a different video, how exactly we deal with this kind of deployment. Now, what's happening here is also, you see, we have API keys, you have deploy, you have chat. And what it does, chat allows you to create a chat interface that you can interact with your own kind of workflow. For example, if I'm simply creating almost like a chat assistant that will allow me to browse through documents, pretty much it's a sort of workflow that is going to access a knowledge base that has some documents that we uploaded, and then we can query information from that knowledge base. So that sounds very much like a chat, like an assistant. Imagine that you want to deploy that as a chat interface, and you want to be able to interact with that document as if you were chatting with it. The way you did, you have this kind of option here in Versur that allows you to do just that. You can say, actually, let's not go too much in depth there because I don't want to get too advanced with this, but I'm going to show you like exactly how we want it. You see here, we have different kind of options. We can have a chat open, locked, and invite only. Now you have to be aware that if you make it open and you share it with other people, they can use your chat, but they are going to consume your credits. The same also with lock. You can share it now with just a couple of people that have a certain password that you can provide, but they are going to consume your credits. And that invite only, it's about a specific emails that you can provide, and you can add here the emails that are allowed in a way to access that. Let's try to create one that is locked. It's behind a password. I'm going to call this password, I'm just going to say test for now. And I'm going to say this tutorial. The chat URL is going to be called Versur tutorial. And you can give here like any kind of descriptions so that it's clear. You can also give here which are the outputs that you want to have the chat generating. So we can say, I want to output all of them, all the information that each block is output. Or you can say, actually, I just want, so you can remove them. Or you can say, I just want the output block. I'm going to scroll to the bottom. Let's see, where is the output block? I just want to output the data that is inside the output block. And how do I know that data? So if you go here to expand, you see data. This is what I want to output. That's data. That's why here, when I'm going to chat, I have to redo this. Sorry, test. And then here, I'm just selecting the data of the output block. You can have now a welcome message. You can also add startup prompts, and you can create a top-down, a real view. Those are startup prompts. And we can see in a moment how those look like. You can also add like a logo if you want to have a specific logo. And then you can say deploy chat. And once you have this, you can click here, open chat. And you see here what we have now. We have a completely new page that was created, but this page now it's called Versur tutorial at versur.ai. It's almost like a sub page of Versur. You can create your own chat kind of interface, and then if you're a company, you can create for your employees internally, you can create this kind of interface that will allow them to interact directly with different kind of workflows that you're developing. Here, I'm just going to type in the password, continue. And as you can see now here, I have the starter prompt, I have the inputs, I have a chat history. I can really interact now with this as if this were a chat. I can interact with my deployed now workflows just like that. Now you see here, we always have the updates in case that I'm making changes and I have to almost like redeploy. I can always go back to deploy and then just update. Let's see if I'm making changes to this and I'm adding, let's say deleting this, adding a condition. We change now this specific deployed workflow. If I go back here to deploy, external, deploy, you see here, I have the option now to redeploy. Like this in a way, always when you make changes, you can redeploy without like having to reconfigure everything. Now, another aspect that is quite important here is kind of aspect of where do we have a list of workflows that are deployed? And we do have a list of things that are deployed. And also like when you go here to workspace and workflow, you'll see here you have this kind of rocket icon, the green rocket icon, and that shows you that specific workflow. It's a deployed workflow. It means that you can have external applications call on that workflow and execute that specific workflow without at all opening Versur. And this is something that I'm going to show in future videos. But what's important right now for us is to see that this kind of idea of how we deploy, this is the sign that the workflow is deployed. And then if you go to deployments, you're going to see here all the workflows that were deployed in this specific project, in this specific workspace. As you can see here, we have just one deployed workflow right now. And as you can see, because I made this kind of changes, I added a new block. Also here is giving me this button to update. So I can update. It's showing that I changed the state from the last deployment and I should update it. I can just click update here and it's going to now update and you have the latest one. In case that you want to just pause the deployment, that means that you're not going to remove or you're not going to delete the deployment, but you just pause access to it. You can always press pause. Or if you want to completely remove access to this specific workflow, you just press here stop, and that's going to remove now that workflow from being deployed. Therefore, no external application will be able any longer to access or to trigger this specific workflow.